Welcome. On behalf of GW Law's Environmental and Energy Law program, I'm delighted to welcome our audience today and thank you for tuning in. I especially want to welcome our guest, GW Law alumnus Dan Oginsky. This is the sixth of a series of discussions about careers in energy law and environmental law. We have a second program later today at 3 p.m. in which Adrienne Clare will discuss the role in private practice and the many aspects of energy law practice. We will not have any career panel discussions next week. Instead, we will be sponsoring our annual Shapiro Symposium. So I urge you to check into our website and find the information and join us for that. We will be finishing up this series on March 25th. That will be the last for this semester. And that will be with David Danner, chair of the Washington State Utilities and Transportation Board. Tapes of today's program and past interviews will be available on our YouTube channel. From the YouTube search bar, just look for GW Law and GW Environmental Law, and you'll find us. For today's program, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A box, not the chat. We will be monitoring the Q&A box and happy to take your questions. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Dan Oginsky. He's the president of Harmonic Holdings LLC. He began his career in private practice and then moved to ITC Holdings LLC. I'm sorry, ITC Holdings Corp. At ITC, he held the position of executive vice president and general counsel, and then he stepped into the positions of executive vice president for grid development and then executive vice president and chief administrative officer. So today we're going to talk a lot about that transition from law to business. In May 2020, he left ITC, and that was to found Harmonic Holdings. We are happy to catch him today on the go. He's a busy man, but he's agreed to take out time for this, and I really appreciate that. So welcome, Dan, and thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And yes, I think the fact that I'm doing this from my car, sitting still, but from my car, it does reflect happily where I'm kind of at with my career, moving around a lot, which is fun.
Yes, and just in case anyone does have any concerns, he is parked. He is not moving and talking. Right. This is not a safety violation. So, Dan, I want to start sort of a little bit in the middle of your career, to the latter part of it. You spent a lot of years in the corporate executive suite. And I want to focus on that point where, you know, your title changes overnight from general counsel into your business positions, but clearly that's not something that just happens that abruptly. Can you talk to us a little bit about ITC Holdings and how your career evolved from moving from the legal, officially on the legal side, to officially on the business side, and what that transition looks like?
Sure. Well, I think the transitions in my career tracked a lot of transitions that went on with the company, ITC, while I was there. You know, I started there at ITC when it was owned by private equity and doing business just in Southeast Michigan. Within a few months of joining as the general counsel, we started a process to go public. So we did an IPO. We bought two companies. That was an interesting couple of years. We started new development efforts in new states. So the company grew a lot very quickly. And during that time, I needed to grow too. I was a young professional, frankly, when I started the company and was learning a lot. And one of the ways I needed to grow was as a leader in an organization like that. When I started, I was the general counsel, and we had one other attorney working full time. And within probably 5 years, maybe 6 years, the department grew to closer to 40 people. We had real estate too. But it was a lot of growth because the company grew so fast. And what that meant for me is I had to move from, you know, being a lot more into execution, a lot more into organizational leadership. And part of that for me as the company was growing too, is finding that I was really enjoying the business side of what we were doing. Trying to figure out how to grow the company. I have a creative streak in me. So a lot of that, there's a creative element to figuring out how to, you know, how does a company that's doing utility, it's a utility in a very traditional business. Try to start, putting a new infrastructure business in a state where it currently isn't operating. That there's no playbook for that when we were doing it. So I really enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed the leadership aspect in terms of a lot of it's about connecting and relating with people. So what was going on with me as that was occurring was finding that just this feeling like I could do more, wanted to be more involved in the business. Luckily, I was working with a good team who were receptive to, sharing some more of that space with me. And just over time, I kept growing and saying I wanted to broaden out, and was given an opportunity to do other roles. I will tell you and folks who listen to us that making that, in my experience, and just talking with other folks, transitioning from in-house lawyer to business side is a not an easy transition to make. It's can be difficult. Doesn't have to be, but I've heard it can be, and it really calls on one to be an agile learner, and it calls on you as a lawyer to be quite well rounded in terms of adding to your legal acumen and your analytical skills, other abilities that are kind of the softer side of things, just in terms of connecting with and relating with people, um, you know, acting on when things are urgent enough, making choices and making decisions and acting even if you don't have full information or you're dealing with ambiguous circumstances. That can be harder at times with people who are trained to get information, figure it all out, and make a plan. So really it calls on you to be an agile learner, but it does open you up to so much more of a full universe of things you can work on and contribute to.
Can you talk a little bit more about that skill set? I mean, as a lawyer, what were the things you felt like you brought into the new business positions, and what were the skills that you needed to develop?
Right. Well, I would say legal training, having a legal, mindset. And I don't mean, it's really, as we all know, those of us going through law school is a lot less about learning things to know and more about training your mind how to think. That machine, so to speak, or that processor is very valuable in circumstances where it's uncertain how to proceed. You may have a goal, or an organization wants to do something, it's not clear how to proceed. It can be very helpful to bring a discipline to that is good, or very skilled at uh, soaking in information, looking at data, synthesizing it all together, and figuring out where do we go from here. And it's really that kind of synthesizing it all together that I think business people look to lawyers. That's a highly valued contribution, making sense of things and figuring out from what you can observe and understand, what to make of it, and how to proceed. The skill set that I would say, I needed to learn more of, and I think often if someone's really focused on and good at providing the legal perspective, the other parts that probably you also need to bring to the table and may require some further development is, like I said, kind of that ability to make choices, decide things, and proceed, even if you don't know what the answer is, even if you're dealing with ambiguous circumstances and it's very hard to figure out um, what it all means, because no one can know. And that's a reality of business. And that's the kind of thing, sometimes you have to move, you have to act, or you may miss out, or for whatever reason, even if you don't know what the answer. And that can be harder for lawyers, as we're trained to, soak in the data and figure it out. And then the other part is we are, I say I'm speaking pretty casually, but I don't lay claim to know how everyone's mind works. But I think a lot of lawyers training is about, we're very in our head. We're very comfortable with abstract concepts, and that can be a strength. And we're also, because we're analytical and a lot of times in an advocacy mode, paying less attention to maybe how we're making someone feel, and more because we're paying more attention to the beautiful concept we're imagining in our mind, or analyzing through, what is the right answer here, or advocating. And that is a skill set that is useful to bring and be, that's a necessary skill set, is essentially, how do you get along with people, even under stressful circumstances, and having an awareness of how you're making other people feel, and how do you engage people in a collaboration to, figure out what the right answer is, or what we all think we should do. Those are, I think, the deeper you get into a legal discipline, those things may not be something you're nourishing as much, but are pretty important, in, working with people in an organization in a more of a business context.
So that's you particularly hit home with the risk averse piece. I think lawyers are inherently risk adverse, and business decisions depend on taking risks. So that's certainly a big leap. And then, of course, the people piece, being able to manage. It's really all about people.
Yeah.
Um, excuse me. When we talked before, you had also talked a lot about infrastructure and financing and sort of the excitement of learning all of that stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that journey? I mean, I don't think that a lot of people who think, oh, energy regulatory law, immediately jump to, oh, I'm going to be infrastructure, I'm going to be financing, $1 million infrastructure projects.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a kid who grew up being very interested in policy questions. And I think some of that was just this feeling of, wanting to do important things and help make the world a better place. And that kind of raises questions of what's the right way to do things. So when I got to law school, I was drawn to the idea of wanting to work in a regulated industry where you're always dealing with the question of how should we do things, and what should the rules be. And did an internship at a utility company, figured out, boy, the energy industry is changing. It's very dynamic, and it touches everyone every day. It's very important. So I kind of targeted being in the energy industry, and I'm glad I did, because it has been great. But what I probably expected is, it really being all about regulation, and those questions of how should we order things, and what are the right rules, and all of that. What I found, even starting in private practice, but especially working in a business and trying to be among the senior leaders of a business, is, and to a lot of people this will sound, quite simple, and because it's more obvious, but again, as someone who's focused on being a lawyer, especially in a regulated industry, um, I think over time I was maybe not surprised, but what I became much more apparent to me is, even in a heavily regulated industry, it's still driven by commerce. It's still about business, and it's about making infrastructure or services available to people who need them to live and flourish in their own lives, and other people figuring out how to make money from that. The difference is, if it's a monopoly, or somewhere in between, the government acts as the competitive force to kind of regulate how much they charge, and all those other rules of the road. But I can tell you, in my experience, one thing that has really been a big part of it, and something I don't know that I would have anticipated on the front end, is how much, like I said, even though it's heavily regulated, it's driven by commerce, and that is a good thing. There's a reality to economy and economics driving behavior. At least I should say it the other way: people's behavior driving the economics of things, does work things out. And I think also on the front end, I thought of making things right in the world, or figuring out what the right answers are, was driven all by and making positive contributions to the world, I mean, is all driven by people making a conscious decision to do that, for altruistic motives. But the reality is probably the thing that makes the biggest impact on people's lives day to day in a lot of ways is business, which does have that motive for people figuring out how to make money. But, infrastructure is so key. We all need it. We all need to plug into it to do the things we want to do. And having it there, having it available and reliable is super important. And I think there's such great opportunities, especially with the concerns or the challenges of today with climate change issues and security needs and all kinds of things. There's such a need for talented people to figure out solutions that are, from a business perspective, among others, to figure out how we, have our needs met now and going into the future. And that made a big impression on me, is how even through business, you can make positive contributions to people and society because of what you can provide.
Yeah, I just want to remind folks that if you have questions for Dan, put them into the Q&A and we'll get those on the table. But I'll tell you, Dan, you're just preaching to the choir here. I tell all of our students, you need to know where the money is. I don't care if you're litigating against someone, you need to know who it is who actually has the money to pay. If you are trying to change the world, you need to know where the money is going to come from to finance the proposed changes. And so absolutely, I'd love to see our students be broadly based and, get that background in energy or environmental law, and then couple it with some strong skills, whether it's litigation, business, etc. And actually this afternoon, I'll be getting into more of that with Adrian as well. But tell me,
Yeah.
how should a student, somebody who's sitting here today and thinking, I'd like to have a career like yours, what would you advise them in terms of what they should be doing today?
Well, I'll start with the kind of very generic part of it and then try to be more specific. But I'm a big believer in getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, meaning push yourself to be, pushing beyond your comfort zone, find learning experiences, work with people who can be good mentors. And sometimes that means people who aren't that easy to work with. Those can be, if not intentionally or unintentionally, sometimes the best teachers. But I'll tell you, in a business sense, somewhat all of business really, but my experience as people's careers progress, I've seen a lot of people go down one of two paths. One path is the deep expert, someone who's really deep in their expertise. They're kind of focused in an area. It gets more narrow as you go along, but it's the depth of that experience that's valued. The other path, and they're not mutually exclusive necessarily, but generally speaking, the other path, so to speak, is what I would call, and is often referred to as, the agile learner, meaning, someone who has the ability to have enough expertise in different areas, but can work in different areas and learn them as they go along. And that's where you often have a chance to have a broader impact and a higher level of leadership in an organization, for example, because you're in a position, or you have the ability, given some of your experience and expertise and your ability to learn quickly and make sense of things. You can synthesize different areas together, which is necessary for a higher level leader. So I would, in addition to legal training and legal acumen and advocacy and those sorts of things, if you're interested in the kind of career path, whatever that is, but working in business or doing some of the things I've done, I also would prioritize paying attention to business, paying attention to economics, and thinking about the industry through the lens of, in a sense, follow the money. How does commerce work in the energy industry? And then I'd also find opportunities to grow yourself as a personal leader. And I think those things can be helpful. I know one person I worked with early on had a saying that a lot of times people are not necessarily looking for legal advice, they're looking for business advice from a legal perspective. which puts a different shade on it. I think it can be helpful. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's just kind of a human nature thing. I think we all think the thing we do is the important part, and all the other stuff revolves around it. I can tell you that in a business context, people do highly value support, advocacy, or especially advice. You can make real positive contributions if you try to look at things from a business perspective, and it puts it in a real context. A lot of times, what is the right answer or the right way to proceed? There's not just one. Businesses just need to understand the options. What is an evaluation of risk? And they want some sense of predictability so you can chart a course forward. It doesn't have to be the right answer. It just has to be enough of a right answer to know to make choices about here's how we want to handle things, and we understand the risk we're taking going this route.
Yeah, I certainly, when I was in private practice, nobody ever hired me just to write a memo about an abstract question. They came to me because they had a business problem to solve.
Right, exactly.
So I think you phrased it exactly appropriately. So we do have a question that's come in, which is whether or not you believe there's value in getting a business degree for the C-suite as well as your legal degree. Let's see. Do you and will either to help you get there or substantively once you're there? So that business degree. What do you think?
I think there's different ways to get there. That's one of them. That's not been my path, so it's hard for me to evaluate that. But I do think, I'll say this, I do think in business, especially as you try to elevate up different ranks, having an understanding of accounting, having an understanding of a balance sheet, knowing how to read financial statements, and some of what I'm talking about, those leadership skills, I do think there's value in that. Those are the kinds of things that you learn along the way. I think working in the energy industry, I've always thought of it as a dinner party. A lot of it is knowing the acronyms is kind of like the password, and then you know enough to be at the dinner party and all of that. But there's more, yes, in a business or even working in private practice and advising businesses, knowing those kinds of things can be helpful. It's always a question of how do you allocate your time? So I can't say that business degree, I wouldn't say it's necessary, and I wouldn't say that's the ticket that gets you there, but I do think the things you'd learn there are helpful to the kind of other disciplines that I'm talking about.
Yeah, so certainly some business skills, even if you don't have the degree.
Right.
We have another question here that says, do you have any recommendations for internships to get started in this field, or recommended places to intern to get your foot in the door?
I don't know. I mean, if you're interested in more, I guess the best recommendation I could give is businesses do have internship programs. I would look for, probably the best thing to do is try to work inside of a business and learn what you can with how a business operates. So, and a lot of times people are looking for internships and summer positions at law firms and government agencies and all of that. Maybe it's not thought of as much about trying to work in-house at a business, but those things are out there. And I think if you're interested in what I'm talking about, I'd probably recommend trying to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that often people think it's a straight arrow that I get this job and everything just marches, but sometimes it's you get a little here and a little there and a little there, and then it comes together. So
Yeah.
Sample definitely. Dan, we're getting close to the end of our time, and I really would like to get in a little bit to what you're doing now with Harmonic Holdings LLC. I know that you're an entrepreneur now, you've started your own business, you're out there doing some really great work. Can you talk to us a little bit about that experience and what you're achieving?
Sure. So it's kind of interesting. Like I said, when we started, I have for the longest time been interested in, helping to make the world a better place. Or really, I also have this streak in me that likes to be creative and build things. I was a lawyer. I worked inside, a company and learned a lot about business, and probably discovered in myself something I didn't anticipate as much is a spirit of entrepreneurship. And I will say, by the way, that for lawyers, don't ever let anyone tell you you can't be an entrepreneur. And especially if you're in private practice, you basically are, because you have to build a book of business. But you can bring a spirit of entrepreneurship to anything that you're doing. You do have to be aware that there's a counterbalance. The way we're trained to think and figure out problems is more of a, slows you down a little bit. But don't let anyone tell you can't be, a builder and an entrepreneur. But in any event, Harmonic is, we think of ourselves as a platform that people can plug into to grow, whether you're building a business, building personal strength and wellness, building community, or art and creative expression. And it's kind of funny because you listen to that and say, well, what does that have to do with a legal background and having worked in a company that you helped to take public and buy companies and stuff like that? And the answer is it's infrastructure. The energy industry is largely about infrastructure. ITC was an infrastructure company. I'd say more than a utility, it's an infrastructure company. Infrastructure meaning someone with capital can invest in infrastructure and then make it available to people so they can buy little pieces of it for their needs. That's a tremendous value. And what we at Harmonic have done has built, we have 4 physical locations that allow people to come and work, co-work, meet with each other, have events, social gatherings even, and do some other things. And I think we're basically, like I said, in the business of providing infrastructure that helps people grow what they're trying to, which I like to think, in addition to the physical spaces that we've created, also with the technology and the business systems we offer, along with our own support and coaching, I think we're a place, like I said, people can plug into to grow their business, help themselves be well, and do other things. So I'm really proud of that. I'm really happy with it, and I am quite pleased that this path I've been on, from one interested in policy to a legal training to helping to build an infrastructure company, has led me to this point. Basically, in some sense, trying to be around things I really enjoy and working with people I enjoy and figuring out how to build a business while trying to offer infrastructure to people to help them grow.
That is just such a wonderful trajectory you've had of personal growth, career growth, all kind of coming together into what's obviously something that's very near and dear to your heart. And I really wish you all the best of luck with that.
Thank you.
I think we're about at the end of our time. So I just want to wrap up by thanking you so much for doing this. I'm sure the students have appreciated it very much. For the students out there, if you have friends that you want to tell them, hey, you missed this, it will be up on YouTube. Probably, it usually takes us about a week or so to get them up. But with that, Dan, I want to thank you so much. We'll let you get back on the road and back to business, and talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
You betcha.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.